Welcome to Yacht Crew Vlogs, where we tell the stories of those in the yachting industry. A behind-the-scenes look that discovers the individuals in the industry, their history, their passions, and what inspires them to do what they do.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I am your host, and I'm very pleased to welcome my next guest, Kirsten Fisk. She is coming to us from the U.S. How are you, Kirsten?
I'm doing well. How are you, Ria?
Good, thank you. Thank you for taking the time and, of course, for allowing us to share your story today.
Absolutely.
October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. There was a huge uproar within the yachting community not too long ago in regards to a young lady that had found herself in that situation. And therefore, you came to my attention. Tell us your story.
So I met him back in 2013. He came on as a sailing instructor at my yacht club. I was an aquatics director for the Beaufort Yacht and Sailing Club in Beaufort, South Carolina. And he was hired on as a sailing instructor. And my job oversaw all of what went on with the pool area, any activities that the summer camp, we had a big summer camp, any activities that they had that was going on out on the water, like paddle boarding, if they were fishing off of the dock, anything like that, anything safety related, I was involved in. And at the same time, we had the little sailing club going on. And so during their breaks and around lunchtime, they would bring their students over to the pool. And usually it would be that the sailing instructors would just try to pawn them off on the lifeguards and go off and do whatever they want, make their phone calls, stay on their phone, whatever. Jack was not like that. He actually would swim with the kids, he'd play with them. He would come over and chat with the lifeguards. He was very charming. He made himself very much available. And that's how I met him. And that's kind of how he, I wouldn't say what are the words? He
ingratiated.
Yeah, exactly. Into my world, essentially. And then we ended up hanging out and whatnot, and then ended up evolving into a relationship in which I ended up actually moving to Georgia. And I ended up going back to school, obtaining my bachelor's while we were together. He began becoming violent about a year in. It was a normal day. I came home from class or the gym or something and walked into the room that we shared at that time. And his laptop was open, and it's hard to not see what's on it. He had Facebook pulled up, the messages were pulled up. I mean, it was all right there for you to see. There was nothing being hidden. I looked at the computer and there were messages between him and another woman. So when he came home, I confronted him, and instead of, I'm so sorry, yes, I admit my fault, whatever, he denied it. It was my fault. That he was convinced that I had cracked his password on his computer. So he immediately set to changing the passwords and everything, and pretty much attempted to gaslight me into thinking that all of this was my fault. And I was like, I didn't do anything. I came home from school or whatever, and this was up. I could see it. So when I confronted him, he became very angry, immediately changed all of his passwords, but then became violent. I don't remember exactly what happened first, because this entire night, I mean, realistically, the assault probably lasted maybe 10 minutes, but that's a long time. And when somebody punches you in the face and the next thing you know, you're on the ground, you don't know which way is up. And so the first time I confronted him and he punched me in the face, I somehow ended up on the ground. I don't know if he maybe kicked my leg out from underneath me, or maybe it was from the impact. And then I just remember him choking me, and I somehow got out from underneath him. And I remember screaming for help, and there were other people home and nobody did anything, locked doors. It was they knew that he was capable of this and that he was violent and did not want anything to do with it. And so I ran downstairs and I tried to get out the back door through the sliding glass door, and he yanked me back into the kitchen, and I ended up on the floor again. And I remember him sitting on top of me, and my purse had been within arm's length. And he grabbed my purse and he just dumped the contents on top of me. And at that time, it was around the time I quit smoking cigarettes, but I still had a pack of cigarettes in my bag. And so he's on top of me and dumping all this stuff on me, and I'm trying to breathe, and I'm crying, and I'm trying to process what's happening to me. And he grabbed the pack of cigarettes and crumpled them into my face. So I've got tobacco bits in my eyes and going up my nostrils, and I'm inhaling it. And I, again, somehow got out from underneath him and ran. And I remember, again, like yelling for help, and nobody came out. Do I think that somebody heard me? Yes, absolutely. Do I think that anybody wanted to risk like their own safety to come and help me? Absolutely not. But it just reminds me of the Kitty Genovese case in New York City, where she was in her, like the building, her apartment building, and she was stabbed and being attacked, and she was screaming for help. 52 people heard her and nobody came to help. This was like that. So he caught up to me in the field and kind of bear hugged me from the back and kept me like that until I stopped, and nobody came. And I don't remember how I got back to the house. I don't remember. I have no idea if he carried me or if I willingly walked or anything like that. But when I woke up the next morning, it was immediately being love bombed. Like I was being manipulated. Oh, please don't call the police. Please don't tell anybody. Like repeatedly. And being that I had been with this person for a year and I had never experienced this before, I didn't go to anybody. I didn't. And especially like after, like during the assault, I was screaming for help and nobody came to help me. It didn't occur me that anybody would want to help me. And then a couple weeks later, after he seemingly got away with it, and he was over the love bombing stage, essentially, it became, well, nobody will believe you if you go forward. I'll just sue you. My family has law offices. Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm not going to be arrested. And his family does have 3 law offices in Georgia. And at one point, his stepmother was a federal judge. And I do know of several instances where he should have been arrested and charged, prosecuted for assault, including an instance where he headbutted a police officer and he got away with it. So did I believe him? Absolutely. And that was just the first time. That continued on for another 3-4 years.
One thing that a lot of people don't understand, that it happens once and everyone that it never happened to says, I would leave. Why didn't you leave?
It's funny that you say that, because I was 100% one of those people, and everybody that knows me knows. I think that one of the reasons it's so hard for some people to recognize, like when their friends are being abused and going through these things, and what makes it hard for us to come forward, is that nobody views us as a victim. I am a strong woman. I have competed in strength competitions, and I used to do obstacle course racing. I'm training for a marathon right now. Like, I am not viewed as a weak person. And so when this happens to you, or when this happened to me, this very much affected how I viewed myself, because I view myself as a strong woman. I can overcome a lot of adversity. So when this happens to you, you're almost in disbelief. And I said, oh, I would never be the woman like who behind closed doors is being beaten and being silenced and whatnot. But then you become that person because you're too embarrassed to come out and tell people. So you can say, I will never be the person that this happens to, until it happens to you. And then you're caught between a rock and a hard place, because it's embarrassing. And people say hurtful things. Oh, well, you deserved it. Or you're not a victim. Look at you. Like people that his family members that up until a few months ago, when I was helping another one of his victims out of their relationship, and I still had not come out publicly and denounced or maybe shared my story with anybody. Facebook is like a very public place to do that, but also some people view that as inappropriate. And it's, well, where is the appropriate place to do that? Where is the right place to tell people that this person is abusive and is a danger to society? And they'll victim blame you. Well, you should have gotten out. You shouldn't have believed them. And well, why wouldn't I believe them? I was screaming for help when I was being assaulted and nobody came to help me. So why would I believe that somebody's going to help me after the fact?
What was the final straw for you?
There was one that was almost a complete final straw, and then there was the final straw. There was one incident in my apartment in Georgia. It was, I believe, 2016 and maybe early 2017. And another cheating thing came up. He's incapable of being faithful, monogamous, et cetera, whatever, which is fine as long as you're truthful about that, but he's not. And it came up. We started arguing in the kitchen. And again, I think he punched me and I was on the ground. But instead of him climbing on top of me like normal, he was choking me. He started kicking me which I believe two of the four women that came after me, two of them, he broke their ribs. So this tracks pretty well. And so I was like trying to cover myself and protect myself. And then he did finally climb on top of me and was choking me and was like slamming my head on the floor of my apartment. And I lost consciousness. And then when I came to, he was putting me in bed and trying to feed me Advil PM, which is quite the opposite of what you should do to anybody who you suspect has a concussion, because who knows if they're going to wake up from that. And I remember telling him like I was going to go to the police and whatnot. I remember him calling his dad and his dad being like, don't worry about it. We'll sue her. Nothing's going to happen. She's not going to do anything. And I could hear his dad on speaker saying these things. And I was just like, what? Your son just told you that he physically abused me. And your response is that don't worry about it. Nothing's going to happen to you. We'll sue her. Sue me for what? Being a victim? And so we did split up for a period of time after that. And then he found his way back in. Like I said, he's like just so manipulative and charming and makes you believe that, oh, that's never going to happen again. Like I'm changed. I've been going to a therapist, etc. He says all these lies to get you to believe that it's not going to happen again. And then it does. And so June 2018, I was in New York. And he got angry with me because he was supposed to be back from the boat. Like he had been back for 3 days and I didn't know that. And I hadn't heard from him. So I was freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, like, where is he? I had worked on that boat cooking for the crew a few times. So I knew the captain. He was a really nice guy, family man. And I felt comfortable reaching out to him being like, hey, I haven't heard from Jack. Are you guys out on charter like last minute or what's going on? And he was like, no, what do you mean you haven't heard from him? He's been back. And so then I immediately start texting him. I'm like, hey, I just talked to your captain. And he said that you guys have been back for days now. I have no idea what's going on. And it turns out he was just like shacking up with one of the stews and he got caught basically. But he got angry with me that I reached out to the captain because I was concerned for his safety. I had no idea. And so he came home and he like flew into a rage. I had taken pictures before of like multiple assaults. Some of the pictures that I remember taking, seeing one of the women that I helped out of a relationship with him in May, June timeframe. She sent me pictures of her assaults and I was like, if you just like were like, we looked identical. Like I could tell you exactly what he did to her because I was like, I remember taking those photos. And he smashed several phones in that time frame. And so this last time that he assaulted me, he had my phone in his hand and he was actually holding it while he was hitting me. And simultaneously, it took this like one picture that went up into the cloud and is the only one that I have that remains from all of the assaults that I endured from him. But it's essentially me like going into a defensive position in order to shield myself from him because shortly afterwards he smashed that phone. And that was the final physical assault that set me off. That was the last time because I was just like, it's never going to end. He claims that he's gotten help. He's not getting help. He knows that he has a problem. He's genetically predisposed to do these things based on his family history. I just realized it was never going to get better. And I had a hard talk with myself. Is this the life that you want for yourself where there's always other women, your health is going to be at risk? How long before I end up with HIV or he beats me to death because of his promiscuity and his rage? And I just wasn't willing to sacrifice myself for that anymore. It wasn't worth it anymore. I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel anymore unless I got out. I just woke up the next day after like having my own little coming to Jesus moment, so to speak. And I was like, I'm done. It was like a switch flipped and I was just no longer going to tolerate that. And I was going to get out before he had the opportunity to do it to me again. And so I messaged him that day and I was like, hey, look, I'm done. I'm going to be out of here by the end of the month. So rent's your responsibility from there on out. I'm not telling you where I'm going. Please don't message me ever again. And he didn't believe me, which I mean, I can't say that if I didn't know me that I wouldn't have thought the same thing because there's no telling how many times I probably told him before I was going to leave him after he had beat me. That day I had gone on to different companies here in Colorado. And I also realized that if I was going to get away from him and keep him away from me, that I was going to have to leave yachting, which was really disappointing because I left an amazing potential career at Gulfstream Aerospace. Like, I'll never have an opportunity like that again. Fingers crossed that I do, but I just don't see it happening. And I poured all this money into getting all the proper certifications and whatnot that they would want or that would be necessary for yachting. And it just seemed like a complete waste. And so I was essentially just coming out here to Colorado to completely start over because I knew that I would need a new starting point, and going back to the places and the people that knew me prior wasn't going to serve me because these people didn't know what I had been through. And he was also still in contact with them. And I didn't know these things. And so I applied for all these jobs in Colorado on the day that I told him I was leaving him. The next day, I got a phone call from Aspen Skiing Company and had a phone interview and went very well. And she was like, legally, I can't offer you this position right now, but this is when you need to be here by. I can offer you housing. I want you to work for me. And I was like, absolutely. It immediately gave me a place to go. So that was a Tuesday or a Wednesday that I applied, interviewed the next day. I left on Friday. And I packed my little car up, and anything that couldn't fit, I gave to my neighbor, and headed out here to Colorado. And I thought that I was safe, and that it was a crazy thought to think that he would follow me out here and the abuse would continue. But he did. I didn't hear from him for 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden I get this message from him, and he's, well, where are you? Where are all your things? And I was like, what are you talking about? I've been gone for almost a month. And I was like, I told you I was leaving you. I was very transparent about that. He was like, oh no, I'm not letting you go. And I was like, I'm gone. I'm not coming back. While he's telling me he's not letting me go, he's also carrying on this relationship, and had started this relationship before I'd even left him. And he convinces her to move to Colorado and that they can work here during the winter or play during, I don't know. He says that he got a job here as a ski instructor, but he never skied in his life. So I believe that to be a lie. But he nonetheless came out here and proceeded to stalk me. He started sending me threatening messages that once he caught wind that I'd started dating my current boyfriend, he was going to send my intimate photos to Taylor, to my family, to my job, to Taylor's family, to Taylor's job. He had stalked all of us. And without him actually taking action, there was nothing that I could do about it. It was just harassment at that point. And I was terrified to go to the police because then that's more, if he actually followed through on any of these things, that's more people that are going to see like my intimate photos and whatnot, which is like super embarrassing for one. And two, in many places does not paint you as a victim. It makes you look bad in the eyes of the beholder 9 times out of 10. Fortunately, Colorado takes domestic violence very seriously. And it didn't matter that he had these photos of me. So am I embarrassed about the reason that I sent it? No. Am I embarrassed by the photos and the fact that he has them? Absolutely. Do I regret taking them? Yeah, especially when he used them against me. So essentially he tried to blackmail me into getting back with him while he was living with another woman. After a certain point, I was like, you know what? You're going to make all these threats. Go ahead and do it. But then finally, after he started sending me like threatening messages and whatnot, beginning October, I believe 23rd, 2018, he didn't follow through on those threats until December, like 4th or 5th, somewhere around there. And when he finally did send, he ended up sending my boyfriend some of my nude photos and whatnot. That was when we went to the police, because then we had indefinite evidence. This is what he's threatening and this is what he did. And these are all the other things that he's threatening. And clearly if he did this, he's capable of doing those things too. And they took it very seriously. They granted me an immediate order of protection. So any contact with me after that point was a violation of my protection order. Thank you, state of Colorado. I was very grateful for that. And he violated it many times. And then they also issued a warrant for his arrest, because technically what he was doing was like felony domestic violence, and that's what they considered it, and felony extortion. And so he carried on this relationship with the other woman, and continued to message me, tell me that he missed me. He showed up at both of my jobs. He somehow found out that I was bartending at a local barbecue place. He showed up during the X Games, which was very convenient for him because while there are a lot of law enforcement out there, they're not looking for somebody that's violating a protection order. So he showed up at my job while I was bartending, and I was terrified. I ended up never going back to that job after that night. He had been arrested at the LAX airport for the warrant that they had out on him. He was attempting to board like a midnight flight to New Zealand, and they pulled him out of the plane and arrested him. And he sat in LA County jail for about 3 weeks before he was extradited to Aspen. So then he had his hearing, I guess, in Aspen before we went to court for sentencing and everything. And the judge said, don't contact her, don't have anything to do with her, do not message her, do not text her, do not come into contact with her. And the next day, I decided to go into Aspen to get Starbucks. And it was just one of those wrong place, wrong time things. Completely coincidental. I was walking out of Starbucks while he was walking out of another store. I never saw him. I got in my car. I drove to my house. And this is the part that always gets me, is because he could have found out where I lived, but he hopped in his rental car and followed my car, but then lost me in like the main area of Highlands, thank God. And my driveway was just across from where he was, but he couldn't see it because it was like a sloping driveway. It was down and you couldn't see it from the road. And so I got out and was carrying the Starbucks back and was walking across the parking lot when he spotted me. And I was just terrified. I was silently crying, like just tears were just streaming down my face because I'm just like, I have no idea what he wants. I don't know how he found me. My house is right there. And he, again, thank God, didn't figure it out. And he's, oh, I miss you so much. I just want to hug. Can I see Henry? Henry was my dog, or is my dog. And I was just, you're not supposed to be here. And he's, please don't call the cops. After that, I didn't leave work anymore to go and get everybody coffee or anything. He violated the protection order several times after that. I miss you so much and stuff like that. And I love you. And can we please try again? Those I did turn into the police, and that resulted in him being arrested again on his way to New Zealand, trying to leave out of the San Francisco airport. And again, was detained, extradited back to Colorado. At sentencing, or at our court date, the DA presented the facts of the case. They struck a deal with the defense that if he pled guilty, they would drop it down to misdemeanors instead of felonies. I was really upset about that. So the DA gave me the opportunity in court to voice my displeasure at the drop-in charges, because I mean, yes, a misdemeanor shows up on a background check, but it's not as serious as a felony. And it doesn't have the same implications. And based on all the abuse that he had put me through for 5 years and then tried to continue and to perpetuate, I didn't feel that a misdemeanor justified all of the hurt and pain that I had endured. After I voiced my displeasure about that, the judge asked me, what do you want to see as the outcome of this? And I said, I want him to spend more time in jail. I don't feel that the time that he spent there, again, justifies like everything that I've been put through. I want him to have substance abuse counseling because he has a drinking problem. I want him to go to domestic violence counseling because he has a problem. And if he doesn't get help, he will continue to hurt other women. And the judge said, absolutely, we will do that. And so he sentenced him to 60 days with 24 days served as credit, domestic violence counseling, substance abuse counseling. And then he seemingly didn't do any of it. From what I know, he had his probation transferred to Georgia, and his family has ties there. He's straight up told me before that he paid a probation officer $50 a week to basically leave him alone when he was on probation before. So once I found that out, I knew that anything that was required, he was probably not going to do. And if he did it, it was just going to be one of those things where it's in one ear and out the other. There's 4 more after me that are documented. And I think that really highlights like the failure of our justice systems. I just recently found this out, July 4th in 2019, when he was out on bail for my case before we went to court in September, he assaulted her. And he almost beat her to death. He broke her ribs. And then he fled New Zealand. So if he can't go back to New Zealand, because if he goes to New Zealand, he'll immediately be detained and will have to face those charges. Began a relationship with another woman after fleeing New Zealand in Fort Lauderdale, and then carried on with her and another woman in Mexico, assaulted both of them. And then when they're in the UK, the one originally that came from Florida, she pressed charges against him. And then after she pressed charges in England, he fled England. He took a ferry over to France and has been bouncing around between, I believe, France, Palma, and Athens ever since. The girl that pressed charges in England, we've basically become best friends. We talk all the time. She came over to visit me after the fact. And on her way here, she stopped by Newport, Rhode Island, because they had initially taken a job there before the boat that they were on, I think, burned. And he assaulted her there, choking her, tried to gouge her eyes out, told her that he was going to kill her. And so she stopped in Newport because that assault was just 6 months prior. And she attempted to press charges there, and they victim blamed her. They said, "Why didn't you come forward then? We can't do anything about it now." And I did my research. Rhode Island's statute of limitations is 3 years. You could wait 2.5 years or 2 years and 364 days to come forward after your assault, and they're supposed to do something about it. And did they? No. They literally asked her, "Why didn't you come forward then? Why didn't you say something then? We can't do anything now." Basically told her that it's a he said, she said thing now. So when does it end? And now we have the woman in Palma from where he fled from the UK.
Let me ask you, did he have a story, a background story that made you feel really bad for him, and you wanted to fix him and you wanted to help him because he truly was a wonderful human being and he didn't deserve everything that had happened to him?
I'm glad that you asked that, because he has perfected his story over the years. When he was with me, it was that his dad was an alcoholic when he was with his mom and his biological mother, and she was physically abusive. And based on the accounts of his other siblings, that is true. I met his biological mother several times before we ended before we ended the relationship. I put out a no contact order on her because I could see exactly where he got a lot of his rage from. And we were engaged, and during the wedding planning, he stated that he did not want her at the wedding, and I didn't have any problem with that. And when she found out that she was not invited, she started harassing me and whatnot. So I had a no contact order on her. Several months later, she killed her husband. He has not had any contact with her, or very little, ever since. And he had very little contact with her up to that point. But that gives you an idea of, at least genetically, like where he gets this from. And so after me, the story evolved to he was in foster care, that his foster mother was abusive, that his biological mother was dead, and variations of that. And so, so he's used this story about having an abusive childhood and being in the foster system and whatnot to bolster his claim that, he needs help, but, he can be rehabilitated, and he's a really good person at heart. And he's very good he was never in the foster system. He never had a foster mother. His biological mother is not dead. She is very much alive.
Let me ask you, in the stories after you and after him being charged, did he paint you in a certain light for the ones that followed?
Yeah, he claimed, hear all the typical, "Oh, that's my crazy ex-girlfriend," and et cetera, whatever. No, I'm not crazy. But one of the things that the girl in England, we'll just call her Katie, when she came out here, she asked me, she was like, "Okay, you got to tell me your story." She was like, "He said that he paid for everything." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she was like, "He said that he paid for your hotels and to fly you out, and he paid for the chef academy, and that's why he didn't pay for me to go." He sent her to the same chef academy. Crazy. And he told her that he wasn't going to pay for her because he had already paid for it once, and see where it got him. And I was like, "Excuse me?" She said, "Yeah, he said that you had a shopping problem, that you racked up all this debt with Victoria's Secret," which I don't shop there, "that he paid for my student loans, he paid for my rent, all these things." And I was like, I had a very well-paying position with Gulfstream. He didn't pay for anything. One time, he paid for my flight. He flew me to Italy because he got caught cheating again. I had women on Facebook sending me messages, screenshots between them where he was sending them unsolicited pictures. And because I was with his family that weekend, and instead of me just blowing him up and telling his family exactly what was going on, he instead booked me a last-minute flight to Italy. The only thing he ever paid for. He never paid for anything else. He didn't pay for my student loans. I still have considerable student debt. And if he wants to claim that he paid for all of those things, I'd love to send him an invoice for it. And he basically painted me as like a gold-digging crazy ex-girlfriend. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And she was like, I should have figured that it was a lie. She was like, I should have seen those cracks where these gold-digging, treacherous women who cheat on him. Oh, that's another thing, is he lies and says that his prior relationships end because they were cheaters, not him.
At this point in your story, I am just going to have to say, it's almost a cookie cutter. It's almost like society has made these men, shaped these men, and created something that literally is stamped out over time and time again. And I can literally tell your story for you as you tell it. Since 2018, he has now traveled around the world, obviously being funded by Yachting.
Yep.
If any of these agencies had checked his criminal record, would any of the things that he had been charged for or been convicted of popped up if that criminal record check had been done correctly?
Mine indefinitely pops up. So anything after September 2019, that it would have triggered a notification, hey, red flag. Prior, I don't believe he would have been flagged for. Anything after September 19, absolutely. And if they did a background check on him and he was flagged, he should not have had any of those positions. The one in England with Katie, she had found the article from my court case from that day. That was pure luck. They were not there to report on what was going on with me. They were there to report on a major rape case that was going on in our area that involved minors. So they had their hands tied with what they could publish and what they could not publish. And I think that the reporter felt like they hit the jackpot when they were sitting in the courtroom and our proceedings were going on. But I feel very fortunate that happened because that article alone pops up on a search for him. So regardless of if they do a criminal background check, if they do a simple Google search of him, that comes up. And that details that he was convicted. So whether they do either check, it does come up and it has prevented him from several jobs. The one in England, they had not done to that point, to my knowledge. And they used that as an excuse to get Katie out safely. They sent her on a culinary class or course about 5 hours away while they yanked him out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning, was like, pack your things, you're done. We found this out about you. And so he called Katie and was like, I don't know what's going on. I think that they've talked to Kirsten, and they never talked to me. They finally checked on him after she came forward to the current captain's wife. And I encouraged her to find somebody there to confide in so that she could hide a duffel bag this is so sad. I encouraged her to find a woman, maybe a neighbor, which happened to be the current captain that they were taking over for. The captain and his wife lived next door, and I encouraged her to confide in her and to Amazon a duffel bag, like a new one, so that way he wouldn't notice anything was missing. Pull away her important things, passport, anything that she can't stand to lose. And so that way, when she needed to escape, she would be able to grab that duffel bag, hop on a train, and he wouldn't be able to catch her again. And instead, the wife obviously told her husband, and they sent her on a fake cooking course for about a week. And while they concocted a plan and did a background check on Jack and my article, they presented him with the article, and that they had discovered that he wasn't a good person, essentially, and they fired him. So they didn't initially do any checks on him. And I think, according to Katie, that maybe one other time they had done a check on him and they confronted him with it. And he was like, oh, I think he's even quoted, maybe in the article, I'm not sure, but the constant response when people find out about my court case is that it was a low point for him. And he's not like that. And, that he's a better person. He's gotten help. And it's obviously not the case. How many low points can you have like that? And so, but I think that she said that he was able to convince that other boat to give them the job because of how he is in person. So if he's getting any jobs from here on out, they're not doing due diligence. They're not protecting their other employees if he's getting jobs at this point. He's wanted.
Well, and I think too that they're setting themselves up for a lawsuit. If he gets hired and if someone gets hurt, then they're responsible. Let me ask you, now there are 5 of you. In your conversations with the other women, did anybody ever confide in anybody and say, this is happening, this has happened, can you help me?
I didn't tell anybody till after I had left him. I had people notice bruising and whatnot, fingerprints like on my neck and whatnot. I did the typical victim survivor dance where, I was mountain biking. I went over the handlebars, that thing. So I never did. The person in New Zealand, she, to my knowledge, did not. Katie in England reached out to me. I woke up one morning to a Facebook message from our Facebook message request because we weren't friends. I'd never met her, never seen her or anything. And she's like, I'm living in hell. I need help. I need to know what happened with you. And I was like, do I know you? Who are you? And she was like, you don't know me, but I know you. And I'm like, oh God, here we go. And I'm in a relationship with Jack. And I was like, oh. And I immediately just went into survivor mode. I was like, where are you? What are you doing? Are you stuck on a boat with him? And she let me know that they were taking over for, the boat was going through a refit. They were taking over for the current captain. So the official handoff would be in a few weeks. And I was like, we have to get you out of there, because if you get on a boat with him for how long this charter is supposed to be, like several month charter. She's on this charter now. She didn't lose her job. I'm so happy for her. But, if you do that, you are stuck with him on this boat in close quarters. And there's no telling if you're going to come out alive. So we came up with the plan, which was altered. And then she escaped. He fled. And the girl in Palma, she was not comfortable posting personally from her own personal Facebook and whatnot. So one of her friends, who was rightfully so enraged at what was happening to her friend, I think that she confided in her friend, and her friend, being outraged, went and did that post, and it ended up on the Palma Yacht Crew Facebook page. Thank God, because there needs to be awareness, especially in such a small community. Yachting is so small that if it's not brought to the forefront, it's just going to keep happening. And like you said, lawsuits are going to happen. A woman is going to die if he's not stopped. It's 100%. He's broken 2 women's ribs. I endured his abuse for 5 years. The Katie endured it for 2.5. The one in Mexico was 6-7 months. And she was physically abused, but not to the extent, of breaking ribs, but still faced that and is still struggling with the aftermath of recovering from that and whatnot.
PTSD is a very common effect of intimate partner violence or domestic violence. You are the only one that has come out and said your name. We're in 2022. Do you feel that there is still a stigma attached to a woman that says, I was in an abusive relationship?
Unfortunately, yeah. The Me Too movement was happening around the time when I was prosecuting him, and people joke about it. Oh, so-and-so just came out. Me too, hashtag me too, making jokes and whatnot. Or for example, with the National Football League, there's a quarterback who's facing now there's 26 women who have come out against him for sexual assault. And yet there are still people who do not believe that they did this. And it's what's the magic number for you? Is it 1 when it happened, or do you need to see the video of it happening? What does it take for other people to understand that this is a problem? There is definitely a stigma attached to coming forward. That's why there aren't many of us who do so. There are women who, this particular case, there are women who will not come forward because they have employers who are extremely discreet and they do not want that attention on their boat. And so for a woman who works in yachting to come forward and to name herself publicly and to bring that attention is a huge risk for anybody who makes this their career. And while I'm not in that anymore and I didn't make it my career, it could have been. And I could be in that same position, but I refuse to be silenced by somebody who wants to go out and spread lies and who wants to continue hurting other women. I fiercely believe that if you do not believe women, it's going to keep happening. And that is why women keep dying. This is a time in the world where women's rights and violence against women is really being brought to the forefront. When are we going to support other women? When are we going to believe them? I think that if yachting wasn't, the people who owned yachts weren't so wealthy and discreet and hold that to a high standard in terms of the people that they employ, I believe that there would be many more women who would come forward. But there are women.
Do you not think, though, that the industry almost perpetuates inequality for women, which is exactly the foundation upon which violence against women is acceptable? You go to a yacht show, women that are made to dress scantily on deck. History shows that captains will keep their job and the women are unemployable.
Yeah. I mean, Katie, she was convinced that she was going to lose her job because Jack had marketed them as a couple together and that her contract was tied with his contract. If he gets fired, I lose my job. And who cares if he loses his job? And if you lose your job because you came forward because you were being abused, then it's not a job worth having, in my opinion. And other people may feel differently, but fortunately, she did not lose her job and they 100% supported her and even gave her a vacation after all of it so that she could get far away and try to start her healing process. But absolutely, I mean, captain is the top tier on the boat. They can replace a stew. They can replace a chef. There are much more of them than there are captains, and there are far less female captains than there are men. And I mean, the inequality is obvious. Like you said, you go to a yacht show and women in short skirts and low cut tops, and captains are in their nice suits and they got their hat on and they look very respectable. Hard to look at a woman the same way when you dress her up like a pinup doll.
Was there, out of all five of you, was there any organization that you felt you would be comfortable turning to for help within yachting?
This is the first time, now that there's a fifth person, this is the first time that I think any of us thought that it might be possible to do anything about what's going on based on, well, how can we stop him from getting more jobs other than to bring awareness to who he is as a person and to show people this woman's coming forward, this woman's coming forward. He's been convicted of this. He's still getting jobs. What can we do now? So we have had people reach out in regards to contacting the MCA about his licensure, because if they're a governing body over this and there's no oversight and these captains continue to get away with it, this is the only way that they can be stopped, is to take away their livelihood, to take away the access. You can't market yourself as a captain if you don't have a captain's license. And I don't see how you could possibly give somebody a license when they have a history of abuse against women in a position of power over women, primarily women, who, like, he himself markets himself as a captain, and typically with a woman as a chef or steward masseuse to go along with him. So this time we have mobilized an effort to see what we can do about that. We have contacted the MCA. If anything's going to come out of it, I don't know. I hope.
Well, I have to say, in all fairness, it's not just captains, but it's generally the woman that loses her job and has to walk away.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've noticed in the past few years, the entire industry has gotten onto this equality, and we are all for it. We're going to hashtag it, and we're going to have conferences, and there's women in yachting conferences, and we're piling a pile of money behind it. We're all in support of women. But they aren't really where it matters.
And I don't know, it's disheartening because additionally, when you think about being like a minority in terms of being a woman in the industry, you're surrounded by other men who will support other men. And that's very much also been the case with Jack, is that he has surrounded himself by men who have not seen him behind closed doors, have not seen how he acts towards women, have not seen his violence and rage unless they were directly involved. I only know of one man in yachting that he got into a physical altercation with because of a woman, and the other women or the other men around him just support him. So in addition to, you have to think about your safety in terms of, if I come forward, are these people going to believe me, or are they going to back him up because they're also men?
We aren't tarring every man with the same glove. Obviously, you have an amazing relationship now, but there are these predators in society, and that's exactly what they are. They're predators. They know how to manipulate. They know how to tell a story. They know how to make themselves the victim. They're gaslighters. Those men that aren't that type of person, that have a loving relationship with whomever they choose to love, they need to call it out. That, I think, too, is one of the issues, is they say, oh, well, I would never. Okay, that's fine. And I'm glad you would never, because that's amazing. But if you see somebody do something that you don't think is respectful for a woman, in order to be a true ally, you have to speak out.
Absolutely. And that was why I touched on, like, he has surrounded himself around other men who they have no idea, and they would never consider themselves a victim of manipulation, but they are. He is also gaslit and manipulated. And the men who are like him, the predators, the serial abusers, etc., they all do this. They manipulate. It's not just the women. They manipulate everyone around them. They manipulate their environment so that it suits them best. And like you said, what can we do? What can men do to make women feel more safe? Be that ally. Be there for them when they come to you and they say, hey, this man hit me. This man choked me. This man sexually assaulted me. Don't ask them, well, what were you wearing? Why didn't you come forward when it happened? Don't ask those questions. Say, I'm here for you. What can I do to help you? Open up that door for them to feel safe around you so that there are less women who endure abuse for longer periods of time and they come forward in a more timely manner. Because when you feel like, for example, in my position, when you feel like nobody's going to believe you and that you can't come forward, you don't have somebody to talk to, you're not going to, and you're going to continue to endure that until you break. And it's not good for anybody involved.
Well, and honestly, once you break, some women never, ever recover either.
Exactly.
And it starts with even the smallest things, like objectifying a woman, like you see at the yacht shows. That's a start. That's right there is the industry saying to anybody that is walking in for a look-see, to anybody that is just coming into the industry, this is how we represent yachting. As an industry, as the yachting industry, we are representing ourselves, and this is how we are doing it. Welcome.
That's exactly true. And when that's your introduction into an industry where women are objectified and, they're made to look pretty and to say the right things and whatnot, then other people take advantage of that and they view us less as people and more as objects to be used to their advantage or however they see fit. And feelings are not taken into consideration. It doesn't matter how you feel about this is what you're going to do. It's not fair. It's not right.
No, it's not right. And I have to throw some stats out there. 1 out of 3 women have been the victim of domestic violence in their lifetime. 38% of the homicide rate of women are as a result of domestic violence. It's insane. And it's not getting better. If you don't think women have a place, or you don't think women are equal, if you don't think that women should be viewed more so than a sexual object on deck, that's your prerogative. but don't you dare use it as a marketing ploy.
The sad reality is that there are many people who, like you said, are going to hashtag it. They're going to say, I stand with survivors, I believe women, etc. And the harsh reality is that much you say, oh, I would never be the victim of domestic violence. I would never support somebody like that. Wrong. You probably have. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. But if it's 1 in 3 and you work with 6 women, two of those women have not come to you and they don't feel safe around you for a reason. And it has everything to do with, like I said, like abusers utilizing their environment and manipulating that to their advantage.
Kirsten, what's his name? Full name?
He goes by Jack, but his full name is James Robert Magruder.
Some people were afraid. I know that even with the discussions that went on in Palma, people were afraid to name him. I think it's really important that we make sure that we name these individuals. Yes, we're not just going to run around and name everybody. There's women out there that are going to say, oh, here's a way to get back at my ex. Guaranteed. We're all human. But when you've got a case that have 5 women, then you know what? It's not a made-up story.
No, not at all. And to be honest, other women would come forward like I have and be public about it if law enforcement agencies did. I'm not going to say they're not doing their jobs. Newport, Rhode Island, not doing your job. But, England, if they had caught him, they missed him by a half an hour. They missed him by 30 minutes. He escaped and fled, went to London, and then left from London on a ferry to France. And if they had caught him before he left, we might not be here right now. And he would also have another conviction. Women are afraid to come forward because it's so difficult for us to secure convictions. And that is one of the reasons why out of the 5 of us, I feel compelled to come forward and put my face out there and my name out there, because I was able to secure a conviction. And it might not have been for physical abuse, but I did endure that physical abuse and I have proof of it. And I am not afraid of him anymore, and I never will be. I will 100% put myself out there to help other women to see who he is and to keep him from hurting them. It is not right to allow him to continue his trail of abuse throughout the entire world. And I won't stand for it. I won't do it.
Good for you. My biggest fear is that the court system, it's not where it should be.
He's a huge flight risk and they're doing nothing to stop it. He could be gone in the morning and never face court. And this is exactly what my fear was, that they were not going to detain him. He would not be arrested. He would not face these charges, and that he would be able to leave and not come back, much like New Zealand and England. And where's next? Greece?
It's time for a change. And I think that time is now.
Absolutely.
I am so glad that you have the courage to tell your story, to show the world that there is no stigma, to show the world that you are very intelligent, well-educated, from a good background, beautiful young woman, and not that sort as most of the world thinks it is. So thank you for your courage and for your voice.
Thank you for giving me a platform to speak about it. I mean, I think even more women might come forward if they had more of an opportunity. I refuse to lay down and have things said about me and to allow the hurt to continue to another woman. It's not fair. So thank you for your platform and for reaching out to speak with myself and every other domestic violence survivor, because not everybody has that opportunity.
Well, I think we need to start with the simplest of things, and that means just showing a general amount of respect and a general amount of support for the women in your life, the women that you know, your coworkers, the women that you walk down the street next to. That's where it starts. And if we all could be a little bit more aware of that and try to make those changes in our day-to-day life, we would be in a better position. And I also want to let any woman out there know, especially in yachting, if you have ever experienced any violence on board, If you have ever felt uncomfortable on board, that includes rape, physical, financial, mental, sexual. I do know there is an amazing advocate. She owns a company called Yachts Mermaids, and I will make sure to provide that website. I would like to stay in touch.
Absolutely. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'd like to follow your journey because, as I said before, those of us that have survived domestic violence, the struggle doesn't end once we survive. It has changed us, it has shaped us, it has made the people that we have become. Some never recover. Others go on to do great things. Others go on to be an advocate. You've been watching Kirsten Fisk. If you want to see the write-up, you're more than welcome to click on the link we provide. If you're in yacht management, if you're in recruitment, if you see this man's face or his resume cross your desk, please do all of us a favor and roll it up in a ball and throw it in the filing cabinet. You've been watching another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I have been your host. We'll see you again next time.